Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. U.S. President Donald Trump is in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday to kick off his visit to the Gulf. He is set to participate in a U.S.-Saudi investment forum and meet the kingdom's leaders before traveling to Qatar and the UAE later in the week. The trip is the first major one of Trump's second term, after he went to Italy for Pope Francis's funeral. A flurry of deals related to defense, AI, and energy are expected to come out of the visit, amid significant diplomatic activity surrounding the Gaza war, Iran's nuclear program, and Syria. Hamas released American-Israeli hostage Eden Alexander on Monday, after deliberations with the U.S. Trump said shortly before departing for Riyadh that he is open to removing sanctions on Syria. The U.S. and Iran held their latest nuclear talks in Oman on Sunday, and the U.S. came to a ceasefire last week with the Houthis in Yemen. My guest this episode is Al Monitor's State Department correspondent, Elizabeth Hagedorn. Elizabeth is in Riyadh to cover the president's trip and takes us through the reasons for the visit and also what we can expect on the multitude of business and diplomatic fronts. Hope you enjoy. Elizabeth, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, let's start with an overview of the trip. What is Trump seeking in the Gulf, and why did he choose Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar for his first major foreign trip?
Well, Adam, I think it's a reflection of his administration's priorities and Trump's desire to be seen as, the deal maker president. As Trump himself has indicated heading into this trip, this is all about the deals, whether they be in energy, AI, manufacturing, weapon sales, and so on. I think, these Gulf states have already pledged massive investments in the U.S. over the coming years, and this trip will serve to highlight that. It's also a throwback to Trump's first term, when he broke with tradition by choosing Saudi Arabia over the usual first stops of Canada or Mexico for his first overseas trip as president. He's likely to receive a similar red carpet welcome when he touches down in Riyadh on Tuesday. I mean, who can forget that iconic, instantly memeable glowing orb photo from his first trip back in 2017? I have a feeling we're going to see some equally memorable photo ops this week.
And what do we know about the balance between business and political priorities on the trip? You mentioned the deals are an important aspect to Trump, but what, if any, political issues is the president seeking to make progress on?
Yeah, well, this visit comes as the Trump administration, of course, has its hands full with a bunch of regional crises, including first and foremost the war in Gaza and, of course, its negotiations with Iran. But for Trump, again, my impression is that the political and security issues will take somewhat of a backseat to business priorities during this trip. Though I should mention he has teased that there will be a diplomatic breakthrough of some kind during his Gulf tour. No one seems to know exactly what he has in mind. I'm sure he would very much like to stand next to Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and announce progress on the Abraham Accords. But as one Saudi official told me, that's not remotely on the Saudis' agenda for this visit. And that's because the war in Gaza is still raging with no ceasefire in sight. And no ceasefire means no chance of a Saudi-Israel deal in the near term, no matter how much Trump may want one. And Riyadh has been very clear, as you know, Adam, from the beginning, that they need to see a credible pathway to a Palestinian state before they normalize. And that's impossible as long as Gaza is subject to war and an Israeli blockade. I'll also mention that my understanding is that Saudi officials privately are worried that the ever unpredictable U.S. president might say something off the cuff about Israel normalization during his visit that could put Saudi leaders in an uncomfortable position on the world stage.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Elizabeth Hagedorn after this short break.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25, for a discount.
Okay, we're back. Elizabeth, going back to Gaza, Trump is notably going to Qatar as well, as they and Egypt continue to seek a deal between Israel and Hamas. How might this trip influence the Gaza ceasefire and hostage talks?
My understanding is that Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE all plan to use this opportunity to urge Trump to use his leverage with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to push for a ceasefire in Gaza, a deal that would also see the release of the remaining hostages. And there is momentum heading into Trump's trip. In an apparent gesture to Trump, Hamas has released Idan Alexander, the last living Israeli-American hostage held by the group. Trump hailed this release as a first step toward ending the conflict, but Netanyahu has quashed those expectations, saying that Israel is still committed to its war aims in Gaza. As of this recording, Alexander's family said they expect him to fly to Qatar from Israel later this week to meet with Trump and the Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim.
And as the U.S.-Iran nuclear talks continue via Oman, how might this trip influence those negotiations?
Well, Trump's visit to the region comes less than 2 days after his trusted negotiator, Steve Witkoff, concluded a fourth round of talks with the Iranians. I've just arrived in Riyadh from the Omani capital of Muscat, where I'm told there was significant deadlock that emerged in this latest round over Iran's enrichment capabilities. But the fact that both sides have said publicly they'll meet for another round of talks, I think is a positive development. So that's where we are with the talks. And we know that the Gulf states have embraced them. That's in contrast to 2015 when Saudi Arabia and its neighbors felt sidelined by the Obama era nuclear negotiations. Today, it's a different geopolitical landscape. Saudi Arabia has restored relations with Iran, and I think the Gulf in general is concerned that regional instability puts their economic prosperity at risk.
And last question is, President Trump notably said before departing for Riyadh that he's considering removing sanctions on Syria. Do you think that's a realistic possibility either during this trip or perhaps soon after?
You know, Adam, we've been reporting at Al Monitor on the conditions that the Trump administration had presented Damascus with for lifting the sanctions that were originally imposed on the former Assad regime. The Syrians haven't met all of those conditions, but to hear it from Trump himself leads me to believe that we could see sanctions relief in the near future. He mentioned that he had spoken with Turkish President Erdogan about this possibility. He said that, sanctions relief is a way to give the Syrians a fresh start in Trump's words. And, I think combined with Erdogan and then possibly hearing the same message from MBS, from leaders in Qatar and the UAE as well, I think it's quite possible we might see some progress on Syria sooner than we thought.
Elizabeth, thanks a lot for your time, and we look forward to more of your reporting from the region.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks for listening to the Al Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.